Imagine working the night shift, thinking the silence is your friend, until you realize something is watching you. The hum of fluorescent lights, the stillness of empty hallways, the ticking clock-heavy sound begins to feel unnatural when you're alone. Now picture this. A man checks into a hotel but never enters his room, instead wandering the halls for hours, staring at you from the shadows. Or a stranger who knows your name when you never told him, who leaves Polaroids of you taken from the darkness outside. Maybe you've seen a car sitting in the lot with its lights off, no license plates, just waiting, night after night. And what would you do if a pale hand slowly crept up from under your desk, pressing the bell right in front of you? These aren't stories from movies. They happened to real people on real night shifts when the world was supposed to be asleep. Welcome to The Price Paid. Subscribe now if you dare, because tonight we're diving into 4 disturbing true stories that will make you question if working alone in the dead of night is ever truly safe. Working the night shift at a hotel is usually defined by silence. A lobby that hums with fluorescent light, vending machines that buzz faintly in the corner, and the occasional ding of the automatic door when a late traveler arrives. That silence can be comforting, a blanket that makes the long hours bearable. But sometimes silence can feel like a trap, especially when the wrong kind of person slips through the door. The hotel in this story was small, no more than 3 floors, maybe 40 rooms. On most weeknights, only a fraction of them were occupied, 10 or 15 guests at most. The clerk on duty usually spent the night half distracted, shuffling paperwork, browsing on a phone, or glancing at the cameras just to break up the monotony. Nights stretched long and uneventful, until one particular night when monotony gave way to something much darker. It began innocently enough. Around 11 p.m., a man buzzed at the locked front door, asking for a room. The clerk let him in. He looked like anyone else might a man, in his mid-40s. Tall, lean, but not unhealthy. Jeans, baseball cap, a backpack slung over one shoulder. He asked for a room, paid with a card, and was handed a key to room 214. Everything about the transaction seemed normal, except for the way his eyes lingered on the clerk, just a little too long before he walked away. A few extra seconds of staring, blank expression, silent pause. It was nothing concrete, just enough to stir an uneasy feeling. The man should have gone upstairs, but he didn't. Hours later, he was spotted again, not in his room, not even near the elevators, but sitting motionless on one of the couches in the lobby. The television in front of him wasn't on. He wasn't reading. He wasn't sleeping. He was just staring forward, as if watching a show no one else could see. When the clerk walked across the room for water, the man's head turned slowly to follow every step. His eyes locked and didn't break away until the clerk was back behind the desk. That would have been enough to unnerve anyone, but things grew stranger. When the clerk double-checked the system, the occupied room list showed that 214 was vacant. No record of a check-in, no charge on the card, no entry log from the key reader. It was as if the transaction had never happened, as if the man had simply walked in, taken a key card, and planted himself in the building without ever belonging there. By then, dread was impossible to ignore. Every movement became suspect. He wandered near the vending machines, into hallways, into stairwells where the cameras caught him standing still for long minutes. He appeared at the edge of the bathrooms, half hidden in the dark. Sometimes he stood in the lobby's corner, just outside the glow of the overhead light, watching. When confronted, he gave flat answers, just couldn't sleep, and then returned to his silent vigil.
Smart move.
Hours ticked by like years. By 3 a.m, the man had advanced closer, standing no more than 15 feet from the desk, just staring. His expression never changed. He didn't speak unless spoken to. He didn't blink often. The atmosphere was suffocating, the kind of pressure that made every instinct scream danger, even though nothing overt had happened yet. And then came the worst moment. The camera showed him standing outside a guest's door, motionless, as if listening for movement inside. That was when the clerk dialed 911, voice shaking. The police arrived after 4. They questioned him, checked his ID, and walked him out. He wasn't a guest at all. The card he handed over earlier had been stolen. There was no reservation, no luggage, no destination. He had simply conned his way past the buzzer to gain entry, and then wandered the hotel, lurking for hours. Trespassing. Theft. But what unsettled the clerk most wasn't the charge of it, was what might have happened if no one had checked the system, if no one had realized he didn't belong. The shift ended, but the memory didn't. Every glance at the cameras afterward carried a new weight. The realization that he had been inside for hours, circling, watching, sometimes hidden just outside the field of view, was almost too much to process. It wasn't just about what he did, but about what he could have done, and the terrifying truth that no one knew why he was really there. What was his plan? Was he waiting for someone to fall asleep? Was he looking for unlocked doors, easy targets, or simply enjoying the power of making someone else feel watched? The questions have no answers, and that is exactly what makes the story so haunting. Even now, the thought lingers. A stranger slipped into the quiet of the night, became part of the building, and made the silence his weapon. The hotel was supposed to be a place of safety. Instead, it became his stage. And no one knows what might have happened if the police had arrived just a little later. Night shifts at gas stations are usually predictable. A few late-night travelers buying coffee, locals stopping for cigarettes, maybe the occasional lost driver asking for directions. For Meredith, a 24-year-old working the graveyard shift at a small station off County Road 11, the appeal was the quiet. She liked the stillness, the rhythm of the hum from the lights overhead, the certainty that nothing much would happen. At least, that's what she thought until one man began showing up again and again. It started on a Thursday around 1 a.m. The air outside was damp, heavy, almost pressing against the windows. Meredith was about to warm up a stale cinnamon roll when the door chimed. A man entered wearing a green coat, messy hair, and a look that didn't quite fit the routine of buying gas. He didn't browse the aisles. He didn't head toward the cooler. He just stood there, studying her. When she greeted him, he responded not with a purchase, but with familiarity. "You always work this late," he said, like he'd known her schedule for years. Then he called her by name Meredith. The detail froze her. She wasn't wearing a name tag, he explained quickly, pointing at the whiteboard behind her where she'd scribbled a note about coffee. He talked about her handwriting, how she slashed her eyes instead of dotting them. He made it sound casual, like an observation. But it wasn't casual at all. It was surgical, precise. He had been paying attention in ways no stranger should. That night, he left after only a few minutes, but it didn't end there. Soon he became a recurring presence. Sometimes he came in. Sometimes he just sat in his car at the edge of the lot, engine off, lights off, watching. Days would pass without seeing him, which only made the moments he did appear more terrifying. Predictable danger is easier to face than random obsession. He began to comment on her habits. How she always checked the back door lock around 2 a.m, how she tilted her head when she was tired, how her shoes were a half size too big. None of these things were threatening on their own, but the way he spoke about them with that flat, curious tone made it worse. He wasn't threatening her, he was studying her, as if she were an experiment. Then came the Polaroid. One night, Meredith returned from a short break to find a photograph on the counter. It was her, refilling windshield washer fluid outside. Taken close. Too close. The caption wasn't written, but a small red circle marked the slash on the letter I in the word windshield, her exact handwriting style. He was mocking her, or maybe letting her know just how closely he was watching. The fear began to seep into every corner of her life. She carried her keys between her fingers when walking to her car. She kept a tire iron under the counter. She changed her apartment curtains and locked the bathroom door even when she was alone. She wasn't just looking over her shoulder at work anymore, she was living in defense. When she finally confronted him, telling him to leave or she'd call the police, he didn't get angry. He nodded calmly, as though he had been expecting it. "I get it. I've been too forward," he said. He framed his obsession as empathy, telling her she was misunderstood and that he was simply noticing what others ignored. But what he called attention, she called obsession. By then, her fear had grown into something undeniable. She dialed 911 while he stood silently in front of her. He didn't run. He didn't argue. He just waited, almost serenely, until the police arrived. When they searched his car, they found the truth. Pages of notes on her life, her schedule, her routines, dates, times, clothing choices. Her name written over and over until the ink became frantic scribbles. The police removed him that night. A restraining order was filed. But trauma doesn't vanish with paperwork. Meredith transferred to another station in another town. She gave up her old apartment. She changed her life completely.
Please talk to me.
And still, sometimes when she drove home and a car lingered behind her too long, she felt her skin crawl with the memory. Sometimes, in the silence of her new life, she still heard his voice saying her name like he owned it. The scariest part wasn't that he had been caught, it was the knowledge of how much he already knew, how deeply he had studied her without her consent, how far he had gone, without once being noticed by anyone else. Obsession doesn't always wear a mask of violence. Sometimes it wears the mask of curiosity, which makes it even harder to escape. This wasn't a case of coincidence. It wasn't a crush misunderstood. It was a person turning someone's life into a project. And that realization is the kind of fear that lasts long after the restraining order is filed. Because once you've been seen that closely, you never stop wondering if another set of eyes is watching from the dark. Gas stations in the early morning hours are often lifeless places. The neon hums, the air smells faintly of gasoline, and the parking lot stretches out in eerie stillness. For a night clerk, the emptiness can feel routine. But emptiness can also hide danger. And sometimes the scariest threat isn't the loud intruder, it's the silent presence waiting outside. For one clerk, the danger appeared in the form of a car. It looked new, spotless, and ordinary at first glance. But there was one detail that made the hair rise on the back of her neck. There were no license plates. At 2:30 in the morning, with few customers around, a car with no identification sat parked at the edge of the lot, engine idling, lights off. Someone was inside, motionless, watching. At first, she brushed it off. A coworker and his friend were there that night, joking around after taking mushrooms, playing with a dog in the lot. They noticed the car too. The man inside claimed he was waiting for a DoorDash order, but the clerk knew no such order had been placed in hours. Something was wrong. The stranger's story didn't hold. When confronted, he tried pretending he didn't speak English, then switched to saying he had the wrong address. He left in a hurry, but that wasn't the end of it. Another car, just as new and also without plates, pulled in and followed the first one out. It was enough to plant a seed of dread. One car could have been coincidence, but two, coordinated, the thought that they had been sitting in the lot, waiting until the clerk was alone, gnawed at her. The following night, the unease returned with a vengeance. At around 3 a.m., a group of 4 customers came in for coffee and snacks. One of them casually asked the clerk if she knew about the car parked far back in the lot. Her stomach dropped instantly. They described it exactly. New Subaru, no plates, lights off, engine running, 2 men inside. One of them had been gesturing toward the store as if giving instructions. As the customers walked past the car, the men inside noticed them and quickly drove away. The similarity to the night before was undeniable. Same kind of car, same behavior, same time. And the chilling detail, they always parked in a spot invisible from the clerk's vantage point at the counter. They knew where the blind spots were. This time, the group of customers offered to stay with her for a while, just in case. They lingered for 20 minutes, sipping coffee and watching the lot, making sure she wasn't left alone. Their presence was a relief, but also a grim reminder. If they hadn't been there, who knows what might have happened. That's what haunted her most. The possibility. Were these men scouting the location for a robbery? Planning an abduction? The blankets piled in the back seat of the first car hinted at something worse. A space where someone could be hidden. She carried a knife for protection, but against multiple people, she knew it would mean little. What made the situation most terrifying wasn't the confrontation itself, it was the fact that she never actually saw them on her own. Each time, others noticed the vehicles and pointed them out. She only realized the threat because someone else drew her attention to it. It meant the danger was close, concealed, and watching her without her even knowing. That realization changed everything. She began checking the lot constantly, every shift, memorizing the license plates of cars that did appear, taking note of where vehicles parked. The paranoia grew, but it was a justified paranoia. 2 nights in a row, at the same time, cars with no plates had positioned themselves in the blind spots of the station. 2 nights in a row, men had been seen watching the building, and then they disappeared. She didn't know if they would come back. She didn't know if they had chosen someone else. All she knew was that she had been lucky. Twice. The customers who happened to be there, laughing and drinking coffee, may have been the only reason the men didn't move forward with whatever plan they had. For a while, every set of headlights in the distance felt like a warning. Every unfamiliar car was a threat. Even days off didn't bring peace. The mind replays possibilities. What if she had been alone? What if no one noticed? What if the door had chimed and she looked up to see more than one man walking in at once? The truth is, she may never know what the men were really there for. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was everything. But when you're working in the isolation of a night shift, you don't get the luxury of assuming the best. Because the price of assuming the best could be more than anyone is willing to pay. There is a special kind of fear that comes from silence, the kind that stretches so long and so deep that even the smallest sound feels amplified, unnatural. For Daniel, a 29-year-old working the overnight shift at a small rural motel, silence was supposed to be his companion. The building rarely had activity after midnight. A creaking wall here, a clicking heater there, the soft ding of the door when a guest came in late. These were the rhythms he had grown used to, the background noise of solitude. But sometimes silence hides something else. Sometimes silence is the warning. The motel was modest. 2 floors, 25 rooms, a lobby with chairs and brochures, a back office with a couch and a television. Daniel spent most nights in that back office, laptop glowing in the dark, waiting for the bell to chime if a guest approached the desk. That night in the fall was no different until the bell rang. He walked into the lobby, expecting a late traveler, but the desk was empty. The glass doors revealed only the dark road beyond. No headlights, no movement, no one. He returned to the back room, unsettled but not alarmed. 10 minutes later, the bell rang again. This time, the chill cut deeper. He checked again, still no one. No cars in the lot. No footsteps. Just emptiness. The third time it happened, his nerves were raw. He decided not to retreat to the back. Instead, he stayed behind the desk. Lights dimmed, waiting. The lobby was so quiet, he could hear the tick of the clock louder than usual, each second stretching into eternity. Minutes crawled by, his eyelids heavy with fatigue. Maybe it was just a prank, he thought. Maybe he was imagining things. Then it happened. The bell rang again, but this time he saw it. A pale hand slid up from under the desk, fingers stretching, and calmly pressed the bell right in front of him. Daniel shot back from the counter so violently his chair nearly toppled. He ran down the hall into the back office, slammed the door, and locked it. His chest pounded as he realized what that meant. Someone had been hiding just feet away, crouched beneath the desk, waiting in silence. The security monitors flickered with their grainy images of the motel. On the lobby feed, he saw movement, the top of a head, then eyes glinting at the camera. The figure crawled out from under the desk and stood. Tall, hunched, hoodie pulled tight around his face. He moved with unsettling slowness, pacing the lobby like he belonged there. Daniel's breath caught when the man walked toward the hallway leading to the back office. The doorknob rattled once, just once, then silence.
I know I'm here.
The dispatcher on the phone kept asking if he was safe, but his throat had locked up. He pressed his back to the door, too afraid to make a sound, every second stretching longer than the last. Eventually, the footsteps retreated. On the monitor, the man was visible again, roaming the lobby. He leaned casually on the brochure rack, flipping papers as though killing time. He walked to the glass doors and stared outside, still and patient, as if expecting someone. Every gesture was deliberate, taunting. Finally, flashing blue and red lights pierced the parking lot. The police had arrived. Daniel watched as the man bolted from the lobby, slipping out before officers entered. A rock was found near the entrance, used to wedge the door open for an escape. But the intruder himself was gone, vanished into the night. What remained was worse than any direct encounter. The memory of that hand, slow and calm, rising from under the desk. The knowledge that the man had been there for who knows how long, crouched in the shadows just beyond sight, waiting for the right moment. Even after, Daniel could not look at the desk the same way. Every creak of the building made his chest tighten. Every time the bell rang on another shift, he imagined those pale fingers reaching again. The thought burrowed deep that he hadn't seen him enter, hadn't heard a single sound, yet the man had been inside all along. The worst horrors aren't always in the dark corners of hallways or lurking outside in parking lots. Sometimes they are right beneath you, hidden in plain sight, patient and silent. And once you know that, silence never feels safe again. Night shifts are supposed to be quiet. They are supposed to be predictable, a long stretch of stillness until morning comes. But the stories we've heard prove that the darkness hides more than silence. It hides people, it hides intentions, and it hides the thin line between safety and horror. In the hotel, a man who never belonged gained entry with a stolen card, wandering for hours while the clerk slowly realized the system had no record of him. He was not a guest though, was a predator disguised as one, and his plan remains unknown. At the gas station, a stranger named Paul blurred the line between curiosity and obsession, stalking a woman so closely that he knew details about her handwriting, her schedule, and even the twitch of her eyelid when she was tired. Another night, new cars with no license plates positioned themselves in the blind spots of a clerk's view. Engines running, men inside waiting. Their intentions never revealed. Their disappearance as haunting as their presence. And then there was the motel clerk who saw a pale hand reach out from under the desk. A silent figure hiding just feet away, watching, waiting, until police lights scared him into the night. Each story's different, yet each shares the same core truth. When you are alone at night, the danger is often closer than you think. Sometimes it stares openly, sometimes it studies from a distance, And sometimes it crouches just out of sight, waiting for you to notice too late. So what can we take from these terrifying experiences? Always trust your instincts. That uneasy feeling in your chest is not weakness, it's survival. Double check doors, locks, and logs. Never dismiss small details, because small details are often the first cracks in the mask of danger. Don't hesitate to call for help, even if you feel like you might be overreacting. And whenever possible, rely on other customers, coworkers, or even strangers, because their presence can break the spell of isolation that predators depend on. But perhaps the most important lesson is this: darkness is never as empty as it seems. Behind the stillness, someone may be waiting, watching, studying. And when you work alone in the quiet hours, you become the target of those who thrive in silence. Remember, these are not ghost stories. They are real. They happen to real people who thought their shifts would be uneventful. Their lives changed in moments when they realized they were not alone. And so I leave you with this. If you ever find yourself working in the still hours of the night, never assume you are safe just because it's quiet. Silence can deceive you. The true price of ignoring that instinct could be everything. Welcome to The Price Paid. Subscribe now, and together we'll confront the darkness that hides in plain sight.